Welcome, everyone, to Frontline Dispatches on Organizing Upgrade, a show dedicated to spotlighting the most urgent left organizing and activism happening around the country and beyond for racial and economic justice and much more. And stay tuned for future episodes of Frontline Dispatches every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern, that's 6 p.m. Central, and 4 p.m. Pacific. My name is Jennifer, and I'll be today's host. If you're watching on Facebook, or YouTube, we encourage you to please leave comments in the chats. We'll be monitoring those as the show goes on. And if you haven't yet, give Organizing Upgrade a like and a subscribe to this channel. And finally, to stay up to speed with all the amazing content coming out of Organizing Upgrade, sign up at our website, organizingupgrade.com, to hear about upcoming events, videos, articles about left strategy for organizers. Okay, let's get into it. My guest today is Joan Suarez, coming to you from Bread and Roses in Missouri. Joan's an organizer, training, and strategist with over decades of organizing experience. Welcome, Joan.
Thanks, Jen. It's good to be here.
Glad to have you. So let's dive right into it. The arts and movements have a long history. So, Joan, you have a long history as an organizer in the labor movement. And we'll love to hear what prompted you to dedicate your time to producing art as a mean to social change.
Well, in preparation for talking with you today, I went back and took a look at some materials that I had and found a quote from Michael Castro, who was the poet laureate of St. Louis. He passed away in 2018. He said, "Art is a form of activism in today's culture. Art's what keeps our spirituality vital, the poem. Although you're not in the streets marching, you are expressing an attitude of life." Well, in my case, I was both in the streets and expressing an attitude of life. And that was just, I thought, a fortunate finding of a quote that really does express my sense, and I think the sense of those of us who know that art and labor go back as long as there was a organizing spirit or drive on the part of workers anywhere. That those folks engaged in street theater, they engaged in visual art, they wrote poetry all through the ages, right up until now.
That's a beautiful reflection, Joan, especially around thinking about, the place that art has in social movement. How are different mediums, how are these different mediums for your audience, and how does it fundamentally change organizers in this process of engaging art?
Yeah. Well, I can remember when I was a labor educator, a worker educator, working for the Amalgamated Clothing Workers way back, um, any number of years ago, more than perhaps I want to count. That we would do sketches every summer at our summer training camps. There would be local union officers and delegates who would come in 100 at a time for a whole week. And during that course, they learned a little bit about public speaking, and they learned how to emote, and they put together sketches to entertain each other at the camp during the course of the week. We sang songs. It was a large part of what went on during the week. That is labor songs that are, again, really familiar to a lot of people. Solidarity Forever and Which Side Are You On? And I could go on with a whole, Joe Hill, a whole litany of songs. So music has always been a large part of the movement. And then, as I said, many workers have expressed themselves, their frustrations, their hopes, their dreams through writing poetry, which sometimes they shared and sometimes they didn't. But if we found and could bring it to the fore, it became part of programs that we were putting on. When I retired from union activity directly and landed at Jobs with Justice here in St. Louis, I found that they had a program called Bread and Roses. It was a committee that brought art to workers and workers to art, so to speak, on an annual basis. And it really is out of that experience that we did our first workers' opera, for instance, something called Solidarity, that we even performed nationally for Jobs with Justice at their national convention. And it was a whole combination of virtual and spoken word, um, so that we had theater from the very beginning. And of course, it was out of that committee when it became just too staff intensive that we formed Bread and Roses, Missouri, where I spent then um, another part of my work life. Having retired from union organizing, I now was involved in both helping to form the Missouri Immigrant and Refugee Advocates, as you know, Jan, statewide, and finally taking the Bread and Roses Committee from Jobs with Justice and spinning it off into its own organization.
What a beautiful origin story. And I'm curious if you can tell our audience a little bit more about the Workers' Opera and like what that process is, who the folks that
Sure.
engage in that, and also like what have you seen from the workers that do engage in the Workers' Opera, sort of their path and their union and their activism.
Yeah. Well, we think the Workers' Opera, at Bread and Roses, we think the Workers' Opera is really unique because it is a opportunity for workers coming off of their regular jobs into a room where they can both have conversation and then take those conversations and turn them into sketches, which they then later perform. Sometimes we add music, sometimes we don't, but it's the workers who are, in fact, it's devised theater, I think, is what it's called, and it's where workers actually are devising or building the program. I suppose that the closest you could come to it would be thinking about something like Saturday Night Live. It's the same kind of color. Or Second City in Chicago. Those are the kinds of concepts. But here it's with not professional actors, but with workers off of the line who are coming in to expose their artistic side and create these worker opera pieces that um, take sketches that constitute um, probably about an hour's worth of theater in the end, and perform it every year, and every year it changes. And part of it is labor history, part of it is uh, current issues that workers have a concern about, and how they're in the lens through which they're seeing those issues. And all of it, of course, crafted around social and economic justice.
Yeah,
Um,
one of my I'm not gonna say favorite because I've been to several Bread and Roses productions in my time in Missouri, so I don't want to get in trouble with anyone. But a production that really moved me, um, and just yeah, and the fabric of it was the Jailbird production. Can you talk a little bit about that production and who it's
sure.
based on and how that came about?
Yeah. Well, we were fortunate enough to acquire a young intern out of St. Louis University by the name of Colin McLaughlin, a very, very multi-talented individual. And after Colin had been with us as an intern for a few weeks, he came to me and he said, I've written a play that I'd like you to look at. And he handed me the script for Jailbird. Um, I was blown away by the script as I read it. It was really, really very good. he had been working on it for 3 or 4 years, and before we finally produced it, it got revised probably yet again another time or a time and a half. But this was the story of Eugene Debs, who had a long history with the labor movement, the Pullman strike, who went to jail for his beliefs. That is, was incarcerated because he was opposed to war. And in those days, we're talking the First World War, you went to jail if you opposed our involvement in World War One. And Debs ended up in prison a couple of times, but the play Jailbird was based on his last stay in prison when he ran for president of the United States, not his first run, but his last run, in which he actually secured, as a representative for the Socialist Party, nearly 1 million votes from jail. Right? Colin had taken that story and put together the scenario that led up to the actual day of the election. And it had music, it had movement, it had chorus, it had a really good, diverse cast. It was it was done over a weekend, finally, at the Missouri History Museum, and we had standing room only. That is, it was a room that gave an opportunity for 125 people to come in and be seated for the play, and we were turning people away. We had to ask them to come back for the next performance. And in the end, there were people still who we turned away. It was a pretty exciting weekend, as you may recall, Jen. It's now going to be performed again over in Terre Haute, Indiana, and I expect that it will go on to be performed in other places as well. It's that good a play. We have been encouraged to reproduce it again here, and perhaps one day Bread and Roses will do that. But going back for a moment to the Workers' Opera, I know that you'd asked about what it meant to the workers who were involved in doing this process and going through this devised theater process. And I think that's exciting as well. I mean, we had one member of the cast who actually got up the courage to run for public office. He ran for state rep. He was running in a district that he wasn't going to win, but he worked his heart out in terms of knocking on doors. Now, this was pre-pandemic, of course. And we've had other members of the cast who have gone on to perform in plays that have been produced by other theater groups in town. We have and we've had the pleasure of taking the cast and partnering with the Black drama students at SIUE, that's the Southern University of Illinois. And out of that came actually just at the beginning of the pandemic. And so what was supposed to have been a live production turned into a video production. And we found ourselves retooling and learning a whole new art form, which we hope to, I think, to continue. In fact, not hope, I know we're going to be continuing. We have videos planned for this year, again, taking sketches from the Workers' Opera and actually putting them to voice and to either Zoom sorts of productions and or using photos to help the movement of the production, but there'll be videos that are supported by one of the grants that we've gotten here in St. Louis from the Gallup Foundation. So it's given these theater members, actors, workers / actors, an opportunity to really grow, I think, not just in their acting ability, but in their ability to uh, converse and think and strategize and put together a production that I think at the beginning they would have thought was just simply something beyond their imagination. So their imaginations have grown as well.
That's so beautiful. Thinking outside the box, both with technology and also workers having the opportunities to really think through about how to move forward in their movement spaces.
Yeah,
Running for office is not an easy feat.
no,
I give credit for those who put their lives into the public service. So, well, if you're just joining us, I'm talking with Joan Suarez, organizer and strategist with Bread and Roses. And I know there was a question that came in regards to Jailbird production that's happening in Indiana. Joan, can you mention the details that you had about that production again
well,
for the
so I
audience?
only have a few production. I would suggest that if the individual wants more information, that they should be in touch with the Debs Foundation. Just to Google the Debs Foundation and perhaps send them a question in terms of actual dates and times. What I do know is that Colin has been asked to bring the play in, I think, December or January to Terre Haute, and we're excited about that.
Of course,
We
yeah,
yeah, and
awesome.
have produced again.
Yeah, and so talking about productions, I know Mrs. Palmer's Honey is a production that you guys are also working for this towards this year. And how did that story come to the forefront?
Well, um, kind of an interesting tale, I think. Uh, uh, After Ferguson, um, the Missouri History Museum, um, with the help of Gwen Moore, who is their historian for the Historical Society here, put together, they took 2 years to do it, but they actually put together a huge civil rights exhibit. Um, and I was in the process of viewing the exhibit when I came upon a window that held a book that said on the cover, Mrs. Palmer's Honey. Um, and remembered as a result of seeing it that Rosemary Fuhrer, who teaches labor history up at, I think it's Northern Illinois, um, that she had at one point here, when she was here in St. Louis, had talked to me about that book, saying it was a book I should read, that it really gave a good piece of St. Louis history. And I noted it down someplace, but I just had never gone after the book. And then when I saw it in the exhibit, I decided to take a second look. Found that it was out of print, but that it was by Fanny Cook, who a St. Louis author, and that I could get a secondhand copy on one of those by Googling by one of those mail order companies. And so I sent off for it, and sure enough, it arrived in the mail. And I sat down to take a look at it. And when I did that, I was captured immediately. And by the time I finished it that day, because I couldn't put it down, I had already come to the conclusion that this was a story that should be on stage. This should be a play. That was about 3 years ago. It takes a long time to get a production of that sort together in any event. We had to first of all find out whether there were any copyright left in terms of the book now that it was out of print. I had to find out more about Fanny Cook, the author, and went again to the Historical Society to get that information. And we went to the volunteer lawyers um, uh, group here, but for the arts, volunteer labor lawyers or not labor lawyers, but volunteer lawyers for the arts, to get some assistance in checking out copyright. All of that was going on over the first period of time. In the meantime, Bread and Roses had hired Catherine Bentley as our artistic director, and so Kathy was brought into the conversation for a question of who do we get to take this book and translate it into a stage play? How do we get it? How do we get it adapted? And she recommended Cassandra Medley, who's a New York playwright who had done that kind of adaptation before. And so the next conversation was with Cassandra, and Cassandra read the book and got excited, and we were off and running. And so Cassandra worked really hard in 2019 to get the book adapted in time for us to stage the play in 2020. And then, of course, COVID happened.
Yeah.
And COVID stopped a lot of stuff dead in its tracks. Stopped us for a little while. I mean, Cassandra had finished the play, and we actually had cast it and ended up doing a live read on Zoom, and then sat there and kind of tried to think through what we were going to do next, since we knew that we weren't going to be able to take it to a stage during the course of the pandemic. And finally, we decided, hey, why don't we convert this into a radio drama? I'm old enough to remember the heyday of radio drama, and it's beginning to come back. So we went back to Cassandra and we said, "Would you mind working with us yet another year? Can you put this into format for podcast?" And she said yes, and we were off and running again. And so actually just about 4 weeks ago, the final product was ready for launch. Now, in the meantime, we've been talking with public radio here with KWMU, and they have a burning interest in bringing it to St. Louis via one or more of their podcast platforms. And so we're continuing to work with them in that regard. But that's, as I said, it's a long story. It is. It was tough during, again, the pandemic year to figure out exactly what to do. But this was a story that needed to be told, still needs to be told, to be heard by people in St. Louis and elsewhere. It's on one level, it's a coming of age story. It is Honey has been for years a maid for the Palmers, and now it's the Second World War, and the defense plants are beginning to open up for female workers, including Black women, and she gets a job in a defense factory, and in the process begins to get involved in labor organizing in the CIO as they're conducting organizing campaigns here in St. Louis. So there is historical reality, historical in terms, it's a work of fiction, but it certainly you can tell that Fanny has taken the St. Louis scene and perhaps based some of her characters on real life folks a little bit. And actually, the book took the first literary award by the NAACP nationally when it was published back in 1946. So you can see that it both is well written, and here that it's well written, and it transferred just gorgeously. I mean, her dialogue in the book was just so rich that transferring it as Cassandra did to first play format and then to the podcast, the radio drama, was I think was a joy for Cassandra. It certainly was a joy for us.
It definitely was a joy for me to hear that live reading that you guys did for it, and I'm super excited to hear, and thinking outside the box in regards to that podcast. So super excited to hear that. To our audience, please drop in questions in the chat, and we'll have our guests answer them. But I wanted to switch gears a little bit, Joan, and talk about how does Bread and Roses continue to build the movement base? Can you tell us more about your youth program?
Um, Certainly, I think the youth program has been a really solid staple for Bread and Roses from the point that we began to emerge from JWJ into our own organization. Um, our youth initiative actually started back in 2010. Uh, Jobs with Justice sent me to the Regional Arts Commission for a 6-month training program that brought community activists and artists together. And out of that training, I was able to partner with Dale Chambers and with Brett Williams to form a what normally would have been an exercise in the training program, but we decided, the three of us, early on, that if we were going to spend 6 months devising this project, that we wanted to be sure that it had legs, that it was something that we could actually move forward if we made the decision to do that. And we made the decision to do that with the support of the Missouri Arts Council and with the support of the Regional Arts Commission. We were able to take our project and turn it into an actual work that is an arts training program for seniors at um, I'm going to blank on the name of the high school now, one of the high schools on the north side. Okay. And uh, After a couple of years there, we figured out, Dale and I figured out, by that time Brett had left us, but Dale and I figured out that if we were going to really make this program mean something for youth in St. Louis, that it had to start at an earlier age, not just taking social and economic justice issues through the arts to high school seniors, but let's take a look at starting at a younger age. And so we left the high school and ended up in the city recreation centers, and it was a building um, process. Again, a love journey. Okay, we went from one recreation center to the city asking us to take on a second, and then a third, and finally a fourth, and a fifth, and a sixth. And we were finally doing all of the summer programming, art programming for the city of St. Louis. Again, the pandemic closed that down for a year, um, and it still hasn't resuscitated enough to get us back in. I mean, it is the Delta variant this summer again was making it difficult. We did during that same period of time, we had begun an immigrant and refugee program as well, working with a couple of churches, and those programs actually resurrected this summer, and we were back in operation. We have a new organizer for that program, Louisa Otero, working with our new director, Elise Mack. And that program was up and going. A beautiful training program this summer. About 10 teaching artists who were poised to begin working at any of the sites that we could, in fact, get reopened. Um, and um, and now it looks as if Elise has been successful in securing county children's fund money to keep Louisa going full time um, for the development of further development of the youth program. So we hope by next summer that it's going to be flourishing. even beyond its wildest dreams.
Right.
And this is a program where again, it's very interactive. We call it community exploration, home, family, and work. And we explore those themes through an arts lens and through a social and economic justice lens. And it's been fun.
That's great to hear, Joan. In closing, what's next for Bread and Roses to engage audiences in movement building? What do you see
Well,
coming up on the horizon?
we I guess two things right pretty quickly in the workings here. We're looking for directors for 3 videos that are funded again by the Callip Fund. One, The Capitalist Pig, which is a satirical look um, at business and economics. Um, and one, a historical piece about the Bread and Roses strike, which of course is part of our history. And
Yes.
then we've got our annual event coming in November the 17th. Hopefully, again, the pandemic will have not gotten so out of hand that we can't do something live. We're going to be at the Blue Strawberry down on Boyle Street in St. Louis for anybody who wants to come on in on November the 17th. And we're going to be celebrating the music and the artwork that are connected to honey.
Oh,
Um,
that's great.
uh, Colin McLaughlin, who I've mentioned before, and who is this multi-talented young man who's worked with us now for a number of years, actually created music for honey, composed 6 songs that we've turned into an album. We're going to be
Mm,
releasing the album that night. We've already released at least one of the songs. It's called July Night,
mm.
and you can find that on Spotify or on both um,
The other music mediums.
the other music. Yes, broad something. Okay. In any event, um, that music is out there if anybody wants to go take a look at it or take a hear at it. And then on the 17th, we'll be performing live. The musicians who brought this music together with Colin performed the music. Some of them will be with us that night at the event at Blue Strawberry. And if something happens that if people can't make it to the event live, or if something happens that we can't go live, it's going to be broad streamed. So or live stream. So that will be an opportunity for folks to join us that night. Um,
That
and
sounds
then I guess my final pitch would be go to www.breadandrosesmo.org because there is a donate button. And what keeps us live and operating and moving and continuing to actually engage audiences in building some understanding of the connections between labor and the arts. It's by dropping a nickel in the pail, and you can do that on our website.
oh, thank you all of who joined us today. Thank you for the creativity, Joan Suarez, and thank you to the production team at Organizing Upgrade. Please join us next week, same day, Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central, and 4 p.m. Pacific. Have a good night, all.